Hey there, we're back with our last episode of CoinDesk Live today. This was all about Facebook's Libra coin project. Right now we have Daniel Wolf. He used to be my editor over at Payment Source when I was a reporter over there. He's covered payments for a very long time and he knows lots about what Facebook has done in payments. So first of all, I know you guys just put up, you put up a slideshow of all the things that Facebook has done over the years in payments.
The highlights.
Yeah, the highlights.
Yeah.
So give us a rundown of the highlights.
Okay, so this goes back about 10 years. 2009, Facebook launched something called Facebook Credits, which I think we could say is a primitive version of what they're doing today. The idea was this is a digital currency that Facebook controls, and it had a very narrow use case. It was meant to operate on its platform. Now, what could you buy on Facebook in 2009? Not much, like digital birthday cakes to put on people's walls or timelines, stuff like that. And the thing is, this was right when something called Farmville was all the rage. And that's what Facebook wanted people to spend their money on, in-app purchases. And when you did that as a developer on Facebook, you had to set prices per region, you had to worry about microtransactions. People weren't going to spend $20, in Farmville, they might spend $1 or $2 at a time, but that's still a big hurdle to cross, typing in your card number as people sometimes do.
Right.
So Facebook Credits was meant to tackle both those problems. It would be a single currency that you used for any kind of purchase on Facebook. So you would be able to buy it in a chunk and then spend a little bit on Farmville, a little bit on other games that I don't remember the names of that were on Facebook. And also, it's only one currency, so you don't have to worry about currency conversions.
Right.
That was the pitch to merchants, is if you accept this, you don't have to price by region.
Right.
Now, that didn't last because merchants wanted to adjust their prices by region. They wanted to target their pricing based on geography. And there's a question of if Facebook controls this money, are they controlling a share of my business? And eventually it was phased out several years later.
Okay.
But Facebook put a lot of energy and a lot of resources behind it. They turned it into a physical gift card that you could buy in stores, so you could gift credits to people, or you could just buy it there, because there's always the question of how do you get money into the system? A question that has followed digital currencies up till today.
Right.
And they also had just a lot of energy, they made it mandatory at one point.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of the end, really.
Yeah, is making it mandatory.
Making it mandatory.
I see.
Because,
Okay.
if you have to force people to do it.
Right.
But that wasn't the only project they had. A couple of years later, they started turning Messenger into a payments platform and started making it sort of like you could use, Venmo, just to send payments as part of a conversation with people.
Okay.
And then they built on that in the same sort of way. They added bots, they added businesses, made it possible so you could send invoices, PayPal got involved, and that started to build out too.
Have you talked to Facebook, or any of your reporters talked to people at Facebook to see how that's how the adoption of that is going?
Of messenger payments?
Yeah.
I don't know where that stands right now.
Okay.
We know that at some point they hired David Marcus, the president of PayPal, to run the messenger business, and that was right before they added the P2P payments. And I remember at the time they were saying that wasn't necessarily what he was going to be doing there.
Okay.
And we know now that he moved on to blockchain last year and is in charge of their Libra subsidiary right now. So it is, again, something else they built out, but not necessarily something that became the focus of it. Very tied to the Facebook platform, which I feel like, personally, that's a very narrow use case, and its success kind of hinges on the success of the Facebook platform.
Right.
There's always the risk that someday Facebook is going to become like MySpace, and if the platform fails, then everything you've built on it fails.
Right.
So something like what they're doing today, which has a much broader use case and is at somewhat arm's length from the main social network, might actually have an ability to flourish on its own.
Yeah. Well, because at least it goes into Facebook's other products, so Instagram and WhatsApp.
Oh, yeah.
And Messenger, if you want to call that another product. I mean, one of the things that sort of makes me skeptical is just that I do see Facebook getting phased out a little bit, at least within my friend group. We all still maybe will have a Facebook, but we spend months where we're like, okay, let's do a Facebook detox, or we just don't really use it as much as Instagram and some of the other social networks now. So, that feels just off right there to do a targeted Facebook only currency.
It is weird to hear you say Instagram as an other social network.
Yeah.
That's a Facebook property.
Right.
And I think Facebook is sharp sharp about some of the units that it has, keeping them separate. They don't usually advertise that they own Instagram. They don't usually put much advertising into the fact that they own Oculus. They just launched a VR headset.
True. Right.
They've got their branding on that. I bought one. It's amazing, but the Facebook integration is very, very thin.
Okay.
You'll see it on the packaging. You can sign in with your Facebook account. That's more or less it.
Okay.
And again, that goes back to not everything has to be tied to the social network for Facebook to be invested in it.
Sure. So another reason why I'm like vastly skeptical of this is just because of Facebook's bad reputation, holding users' data and making sure that's private and not just selling it to any and every advertiser that they possibly can. So have you heard stuff like that? As well.
Yeah,
and what do you think about
that's Facebook's
that?
reputation right now. Is you think of Mark Zuckerberg, you think of him testifying before Congress. That's the picture that's in your head. But I feel like that also gives them the experience. They know what they're up against with regulators. They know the questions that are going to be asked. So they probably came prepared for that.
Okay.
Now, that said, it's still just. There's so many factors in here. It has to be the right time. Maybe 10 years ago when Facebook credits launched, if they had everything like this behind it, maybe it would have worked. Maybe if they had something like Facebook credits today, maybe it would work, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe we need to wait another 10 years.
Right.
So the attitudes towards it, you know what it reminds me of? Reminds me of when Apple Pay launched. Just before Apple Pay launched, they had that big iCloud breach where all these celebrities' nude photos were exposed to the internet. And you think this is the worst time to launch a trusted financial product.
Right.
But they did it. And who's talking about the iCloud breach these days? Apple is actually putting up billboards just boasting about their privacy as though nobody remembers.
Right.
So,
yeah. I mean, users, consumers, time before they forget something is really short now, I feel like. Because, Cambridge Analytica wasn't even all that long ago. And then, like, Facebook's experimenting on their users, like, trying to figure out whether, like, negative posts will make them vote a certain way. Like, all that was not that long ago. That's all been in the last decade, and it seems like really, really strange that people would like jump onto putting their financial accounts into their social accounts, especially held by Facebook.
right. And that is I don't mean to make light of that. Just because they're going into this, they can't be oblivious to that fact. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have the right answer to it. This is something that they're planning to launch next year. There's time for the public to digest it. Maybe people will get over it. Maybe people will say we only want to use this if Facebook distances itself even further or removes itself. Maybe they won't want to use it at all.
Right. And I think Facebook is maybe trying to do that. I mean, seemingly they have a plan for decentralizing even further than they already are now in the future. I wanted to sort of come back. There's a lot of talk about like whether Facebook can actually pull this off with so many regulations as it relates to payments. Like, what do you think? And it also doesn't seem like they've really talked to the regulators. A lot of regulators seem to be pushing back on this pretty hard.
Right. And with Facebook, as I said, you think about, they've dealt with politicians, they dealt with regulators, they know what to expect with this, but so does everybody else who's involved with this. Visa, MasterCard, PayPal. They have gone up against, they have seen what it's like to try and establish themselves in a foreign country. And there's countries that aren't as conducive and aren't as welcoming. China, India have regulations about how they operate with local companies, about needing a local presence, that have made it harder for mainstream U.S. payment companies to establish a presence there. So if Facebook can solve that, then getting into the Libra system presumably would address that. And if Facebook can't solve that, then the same stakeholders are still on their own.
Yeah, right. So what's, I guess, like, do you know what kind of regulations they would need or what kind of legislation they would need to make this system work? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
No, I mean there's no one answer to that. It's a global thing. What works in the U.S. won't work in Europe, won't work in Russia, China, India, Canada.
Right.
I mean, just look at pot payments right now. In the U.S., it's so scattered. Everybody's trying to figure out a way to have anything other than cash that works here. But when they made it legal in Canada, you saw mainstream card networks just jump at the opportunity to be involved. The regulations are what makes the difference. And maybe Facebook can address this. Maybe the other companies in this can. But it's not going to be just like one silver bullet.
Right. Right. So yeah, you've covered payments for quite a while, especially I remember we used to cover like the unbanked, the idea of unbanked
Yes.
payments. That used to be a passion of mine. So Facebook is targeting sort of this unbanked population. I think it was 1.7 billion. I don't have that pulled up, but so they're targeting this unbanked. Do you think that's a good move for this particular product?
Well, I don't think they have a choice because nobody's going to switch their bank account just to go bank with Facebook. So the market for this are the people who don't have a bank account. And also we've seen other P2P startups, person-to-person payment startups, try and target a different audience, college students, families, paying the babysitter, splitting dinner checks. All these things that sound, I guess, a bit more mainstream, commonplace for bank customers, but they find that the unbanked or the underbanked are the ones who are using their platform because it serves a need for them.
Right.
Now, that said, I don't know if the currently unbanked, like the people who have rejected banks, are the right audience for this. I do think there is something to people who may not have a platform yet. Same thing with the Apple Card, where if you don't have a credit card at all, if you have a credit card, you have no motivation to switch to the Apple Card unless you really, really like the fine print.
Right.
But if this is your first credit card and you can get it just from in your iPhone, or in this case, you need to send money to somebody and you're already on Facebook and have no other banking relationship, I can see that as being a use case. But again, it's also the low-hanging fruit there because that is the audience that has a need and may not necessarily want to or know how to do that with a bank at this point.
Right. And I have heard, to be fair, that Facebook has bigger market share in less developed countries. Like people in the US might be moving off Facebook, but people elsewhere, maybe like India was one of those examples, are still very much on Facebook. So that's at least, where the target market is.
Right. Something can fail in the US but still be a success elsewhere.
Right.
It can be, again, it has to target the specific needs of that audience. What Facebook is describing with integration with its own platforms is just one use case, and I'm sure the other stakeholders have their own ideas.
Sure.
But again, that hurdle, the regulatory hurdle you mentioned first, that is the big one to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going into any market.
So I wanted to read, this is one of our reporters, and it comes straight out of the white paper. So the Libra protocol does not link accounts to a real-world identity. A user is free to create multiple accounts by generating multiple key pairs, and then the accounts controlled by the same user have no inherent link to each other. So it's like really confusing to me how that could possibly be if you have to KYC, AML, and make sure that everybody is like not doing criminal activity.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
No.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to make sure.
Again, this is something that doesn't exist yet, really.
Right.
You can't go to Facebook right now and use this. So, once regulators take a look at it, once they see what they're comfortable with, what they're not. I don't know. We don't know what it's going to look like when it comes to market, if it does.
Right. Yeah. I do think that this is like pretty interesting that Facebook, a big tech company, would push a payments type system and like do it in such an open source, like give me feedback way. Like, have you seen that before ever?
I want to say yes, but nothing comes to mind right now. It's the idea that they know that their social network may not be their strength here. So anything they can do to cater to, they've seen how the cryptocurrency movement has evolved. They've seen that people who like Bitcoin because of its anonymity, its pseudonymity, the cash-like properties. And they may be wary of people saying, "Oh, we're just giving our data to Facebook."
Sure. Yeah.
So that may be something to address that concern. But again, like buying a prepaid card off the rack, you can buy a prepaid card off the rack with cash, but sooner or later, if you want to keep using a card for payments, you're going to have to go through those hurdles and actually, let the world know who you are.
Right. Yeah. That's what worries me. It reminds me of, I don't know if you've watched all of Black Mirror, but that episode of Black Mirror where you basically have to send likes to everybody and that's like their tip, and then it runs on their social credit or their like credit scores and all that.
I've seen the first season. I think that was in the first season.
Yeah, I think it was in the first season.
Yeah.
Does this, I know you're like a sci-fi fan as well, so does this remind you of any sci-fi dystopia or utopia?
You remember that scene that I always think is in Minority Report, but it's not?
No.
I remember actually like once I wanted to mention this in a story we were working on at Payment Source, and I went home and watched Minority Report and could not find this scene. I always remembered, and again, this just is a product of my imagination, or maybe I'm thinking of a different movie,
Okay.
that the scene where Tom Cruise is buying drugs from somebody, I always thought there was some kind of fingerprint authentication that was involved there, that even though it was anonymous, they still had to use a fingerprint to authorize it. I mean, Star Trek, they claim they don't even use money. I think the Black Mirror thing is probably the best comparison, because that's where our world is really, I was going to say is going, but it is now. We're all connected through social networks, through video games, through just the social experience of watching Game of Thrones or whatever else people have, that you don't just watch something by yourself or with your family. You will watch it and then go on the internet. You will live tweet everything. You're all connected, and the money is a part of that.
Yeah, totally.
So that gives you access to those networks, even if Twitter may be free to you, but you're still paying the cable company or whoever to get on the internet.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You're
absolutely.
still viewing ads or paying to remove them depending on what you're using.
Yeah. So did you get to read like a whole lot of the white paper?
I did not have time to read it.
Okay, that's totally fine. I also didn't. I've just
I assigned that to a reporter.
There you go. There you go. What I guess, like we're gonna wrap up here soon.
So I can't tell you like all the best jokes in it.
No,
or anything.
yeah, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap up soon, but what do you think is sort of the strangest thing to come out of this big Facebook announcement?
The strangest thing.
Yeah, like was there anything that sort of caught you off guard? I mean, that thing that I just read, that catches me off guard, only because I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I don't think you can possibly make that happen.
Can I talk about something strange about Facebook?
Sure.
That is
yeah.
not necessarily payments related, because
Sure.
again, they just also came out with this VR headset,
Okay.
the Oculus, and I really like this because again, the whole sci-fi idea of everybody being connected is really compelling to me. And if you put on a headset and you connect your Facebook account. One version of this has a program called Venues, where you could go see concerts, sporting events, comedy shows, and such, and it'll sit you in a virtual bleachers. And if you've connected your Facebook account, then it'll say, okay, you have liked baseball. You just click like on that's one of your interests. If the person sitting next to you has connected their Facebook account and clicked like on that, then it'll tell you that. So already you know how you are connected to the virtual person sitting next to you, enjoying the same thing. You can talk, it's you're only virtual projections. You're not going to interrupt the show by talking.
Right.
And that's a really interesting way to me how that connects people. It's also presumably why Venmo was so popular, because it had that social element as well.
Yeah.
So
right
now, the social element is what everybody fears about Facebook, and I'm not saying they're wrong to do so, but they also know how to use that data in a compelling way. I don't know if this is the situation where they'll do that.
Right.
But maybe, I don't know necessarily what has surprised me about this announcement, but I do know they have the capability to surprise.
Okay. Yeah, cool, great. Thank you so much for coming on, Daniel. That is it for our special edition of CoinDesk Live, all about Facebook's Libra coin. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.